I would like to thank three specific groups here. First, the organizers, Jess, where are you, Jess? Somewhere, and your amazing team. I know to put something like this together is a big, big effort, and it's wonderful. And second, the other presenters some have already talked, you've got more to have the pleasure to listen to, who've traveled from far and wide. Somebody got in at 11:30 last night. And then last but not least, in fact the most important, are you, the participants. Because you're the ones, there would be no conference if it wasn't for you. And you're caring about dolphins and their welfare and coming to this event. So thank you, those three groups. And I'm here to share a saga I became involved in 2001. And for 4 years, this dirty world consumed my life. It's really never gone away. It's now been 15 years. And I'm always looking over my shoulder to see if there'll be, I call them the dolphin jailers, who put the dolphins in captivity, if they come back. Because they have tried. It all started with the captive dolphin prison, as I call it myself. It's actually the Swim with the Dolphin program, but I call it a prison because that's what I feel it is. When it opened on my island of Antigua in the West Indies. And I've traveled here all the way over 2,000 miles from Antigua in the West Indies to share this story with you. It's not a nice story, but it's one that needs to be told. And I only have time to share a little bit of this story with you because we've already run over time and I know I can't be too long, but I want to relate my story hopefully in the short minutes I have, and that hopefully I'm able to share with you the atrocities that went on in this inferior facility. And I say inferior because it was only 8 feet deep. And also, it was the site of the first hotel on our island, the Anchorage Hotel. It was the sewage dumping site where the sewage was dumped before it was required that we have septic tanks on our island. So it was truly an inferior facility. And you'll see some photographs. You've already seen one in Dr. Rose's presentation on this. But before I really start, I need you to understand part of the reason I was so passionate about this is my profession is as a professional scuba diver. And I've spent over 30 years, and by the way, I started very young. I spent over 30 years diving with a whole array of creatures, moray eels, stingrays, all kinds of sharks, beautiful marine creatures. And I also had wonderful encounters with wild dolphins. Oh, it's not, sorry, he's not forwarding. I'm forwarding here. Okay, can you fast forward? Sorry, okay, yes, this was the second one when I was explaining that it went on for 4 years. Next slide. And then my unbelievable encounters with wild marine creatures. Next slide. And I've been diving, as I say, for 30 years and written books about shipwrecks and diving. Next slide. And I've had amazing wild dolphin encounters. I knew nothing about captive dolphins, but I've had unbelievable encounters with Honey, the wild dolphin off Belize that used to take up with divers. Next slide. Sorry. And wild dolphins in the Bahamas. Here's a mother and a baby wild dolphin. Next slide. And another encounter with beautiful dolphin. And next slide. And I knew, as I was about to say, I knew nothing about captive dolphins. I had never seen one. At that time, none existed in the lower Caribbean where I lived. And it was just inconceivable not to speak up for the dolphins. Next slide. And of course, I mean, everybody loves dolphins, but there's, captivity versus freedom, and that's a big difference. Next slide, please. And I was already involved in a group called Abbott PC. It's a long name, the Antigua y Barbuda Independent Tourism Promotion Corporation, and I didn't name it. But it's not a government organization. It's kind of like your organizations that are running this event. We're a group of concerned volunteers who care about our environment. Next slide, please. And we had actually been formed to clean up our island, which had a lot of hurricane debris and garbage all over it. So we ran 3 national cleanups. Next slide, please. And then it was my good luck that a dolphin crusader named Gwen McKenna, a Canadian lady, she heard about all of this going on in Antigua, where they were going to open this dolphin prison. And she actually contacted me because I didn't know how to go about anything like this, how to protest such a project like this. And she contacted me. And her big project, next slide please, was she had helped save Jojo, a wild dolphin in the Turks and Caicos who was being hit by jet skis. And she mounted a big campaign on the internet and got a law passed that jet skis were banned in that area. So literally she helped save Jojo. So in the meantime, next slide please. We formed a Marine committee with our organization, and because I was a professional diver, I was asked to head that committee. And the main reason we formed it, next slide please, was because we had a very unique situation in Antigua where an Arctic hooded seal that had been born on the ice landed on our island. There were actually 5 that stranded through the Caribbean. And this one landed on one of our beaches. And I mean, our local people had no idea what it was. They were scared of it and all, this poor little seal. It had been attacked by a shark. And our organization helped rescue it and turned it over to a group who actually set it free, put a satellite tracker on it. It was a tremendous success story. Next slide, please. The other good fortune with the whole dolphin project in Antigua was one of our celebrities who owned a big house there, Robin Leach of the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. He started speaking out about the dolphin project. And he was willing to take a stand because a lot of people were scared to take a stand on this. And also our Prime Minister at the time was involved with it. So, you know, that was a bit of a touchy thing because it became a political thing too. And not only did he speak out, he helped fund it and helped provide funding for eventually what would turn into a big legal case. Next slide, please. During all of this, our Prime Minister came out and said, no, we're going ahead with this. It's not stopping. So, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard when the Prime Minister says that. And ironically, next slide, sorry. Ironically, one of our highest medals that our country gives to outstanding citizens is a medal that depicts wild dolphins. Next slide, please. You can see the dolphins on the 4 corners of this big, beautiful medal. It's a big medal that's presented to outstanding citizens. So it was sort of ironic that we were going to have dolphins in captivity when we say that for people who've done great service for our country, this is what we present them. So, next slide, please. So in January 2001, nobody knew about this. It was all under the quiet. Our then government, because we've had a change of government twice since then, they gave a license to allow capture of 12 wild dolphins around our waters of our twin island state. We're a two-island country. And there was just a huge urgent cry against this. And it was a lot of negative press for our country. It was very bad. Next slide. And this is a timeline. I don't have time to go through it all because we're running behind and I want to tell you the whole story, well, as much as I can. But in 2001, that's when it was granted. Eventually that license, and I'll explain why, in 2004 was rescinded and was taken away. And in the meantime, there were all kinds of events, most of them bad, that took place. And I'll be telling you more about that. So next slide, please. And our organization just took a strong stand. We said, no captive dolphins in our waters. And we're certainly not taking our dolphins that swim around our island. So, fortunately, through Gwen McKenna, she introduced me to Rick O'Berry, who you just heard Lincoln, Rick's son, speak. And we invited Rick to come to Antigua. Our Antiguan people didn't know anything about captive dolphins either. They didn't know the issue. So the first thing we had to do was try to educate our public on what was going on and why it was wrong. So we invited Rick to come. Next slide, please. He was to come, next slide. He was to come in November 2001, and as he was about to board an American Airlines flight in Miami, American Airlines pulled him off the flight with his wife Helene and said that the Antigua government had banned him from coming to our country, that he could not enter and could not, they said he was a security risk. And it was like, we were all floored. It turned out it actually was a good thing because it gave us so much, it got us international press. The Miami Herald, a reporter there said, "What's going on here?" And it was really, it was a nasty thing because it meant that my country didn't have freedom of speech. Next slide, please. And this is the ALP, which was the political party. They banned him and refused him entry. So it started getting a lot of press. Next slide, please. And next slide. And in spite of him not being allowed to come, this was in the early days of the internet, and because we're a third world country, our internet's not so great, but we beamed him in electronically to our government's horror. So he was with us in an auditorium sort of like this with 200 people, and we could ask him questions and talk to him about it. Next slide, please. It took 3 years, but we finally got the ban lifted. I'm fast forwarding about Rick's part because 3 years later, and it also took a change of a prime minister and a government. So it wasn't an easy thing to do, but we finally got the ban lifted, and no longer was he a security risk. Right, next slide, please. And here's Rick and Helene arriving in Antigua, finally. Next slide. And we got amazing press because I guess if you wait 3 years to see an event, that's a pretty big deal. So he came, and as I say, we got, next slide, got all kinds of newspapers covering it, that this had happened. Next slide. And he spoke to literally a packed audience. And it wasn't just, next slide please, it wasn't just foreign people, it was local people, like this Rasta guy who was really passionate. We had one of our local poets wrote this beautiful poem, I wish I had time to read it, about freedom, born to be free, about dolphins. Next slide. And I was thrilled to be, on behalf of AVIC PC, presenting Rick's Dolphin Project Award. Next slide. But then, of course, as we all know, Rick's got a lot of dolphin causes to fight, so it was time for him to fly on and go on to the next cause. In the meantime, a month later, next slide please, a month later, 3 dolphins arrived to be put into that facility there. And I'll tell you more about that in the next couple of slides. There was an official opening, next slide. Official opening where, of course, we were slammed up and down by the government. And in fact, I was contacted. I am an American citizen, but I also carry an Antiguan passport because I've been there 35 years. And I was told that the Prime Minister was going to rescind my Antigua passport over this issue. And I was invited to a quite important reception that our British High Commission gave. And the Prime Minister was surrounded by the most important people on the island. And I waltzed up and said, "Good evening, sir. It's Martha." And he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "May I ask you a question?" And he said, "Well, of course." And I said, "Is it true you're going to take away my Antigua passport because I'm defending dolphins?" And he just, you could have dropped a pin and heard it in that room. And he laughed and said, "I admire your spunk." And I said, "Sir, that's not what I asked." And he said, "We could never take your passport away, Martha." And I said, "Thank you, I'm glad to know." So I got to keep my passport, thank goodness. Anyway, next slide, please. So here are the first dolphins arriving. It was under the cover of darkness in the night, which seems to be how it's operated. And the next slide is heartbreaking with the poor dolphin. Next slide, sorry. Poor dolphin reaching up like, Anyway, back to the facility. Next slide, sorry. This is it, and you can see the brown water behind is a natural salt pond. It's where there was bird life and there was a lot of fish life and things, and it used to flow naturally into the sea. No one knew for about 3 years that it was illegally blocked, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So the facility, it may look big, but it was only 8 feet deep, and a lot of the edges were very, very shallow. Next slide, please. And there was a tourist that wrote this to our newspaper, shallow water dolphins. I don't know if the experts here know, there's a new species now called shallow water dolphins. Because this tourist was so upset to see these dolphins in such shallow water, and she asked the handlers, why are they in such shallow water? And she related in the newspaper article that they had told her how these dolphins were like their family, that they loved them so. And she wrote in the newspaper, I'm certainly glad I'm not part of that family. Anyway, they said to her, it's okay because these are shallow water dolphins. So that was the new species, the shallow water for them to live in. Of course, we know that's not true because there's no such thing. So anyway, next slide, please. So this was where it had been illegally blocked, right there under the M for the McKinnons. Next slide, please. And you can see it was all, there were cement bags and all kind of things that prevented the water from coming in where the dolphins were, because it was real brackish water. It was kind of, it wasn't really dirty water, but it wasn't really nice water either. So next slide, please. And this is what Dr. Rose showed earlier. You can see the runoff. So this slide's not a very good quality, sorry, but you can get the gist that it was not nice water to be in. And besides the fact that it had been a sewage dumping site, I mean, I wouldn't have put my big toe in there. So I don't think those poor tourists knew what they were swimming in. So, and next slide, please. And there were the small holding pens that Dr. Rose pointed out too. And it might look like it's big, but, you know, like the 4 feet up to the shore is like, you know, that deep. So there's not going to be any dolphin near that. So it wasn't very big. Next slide, please. And here we have what we think was vet care being given. And our newspaper got a hold of it. Next slide, please. And they photographed it and showed them lying on this poor dolphin, holding it down, bending the dorsal fin practically over. In fact, we had no dolphin vet on Antigua. The vet, Dr. Tom Brown, was my dog and cat vet. And I actually had a bit of a falling out with him because I couldn't believe that he would try to take care of these beautiful dolphins when he wasn't trained in marine mammal care. And he said, well, it's okay because we can call their experts, you know, overseas. Well, I don't think that's how you do dolphin veterinary care, but anyway, next slide. Also, at the same time this was opened, which was, as I say, in 2001, soon after, the U.S. Treasury started investigating the main owner, Graham Simpson, because he was an American and he had bought these dolphins from Cuba. And of course, in America, we have something that doesn't allow that, so whether you agree with it or not. So he was being investigated, and we were getting terrible publicity for our island. Next slide. And you can see, I mean, press started going. The Miami Herald picked it up, and we were getting all this press. Next slide, please. And we started selling bumper stickers just to get the word out and to educate the people, because we realized we had to, had to do that. Next slide, please. And another shot, and we were trying to educate people too that captivity is cruel. And our people are quite religious, so we also quoted the Bible about let the fish of the sea be free in the waters. Next slide, please. And the local press continued. That's all our government ministers saying they're going to go swim with the dolphins. We have a lot of cartoons that were drawn in our newspapers. Next slide. And we just kept on, no captivity for our island. We hosted, next slide please, we hosted a whale and dolphin opinion table trying to get the public's opinion because we wanted our government to know what all of our local people thought about this. Next slide please. and we had sign up for about 3 days. Next slide. And the numbers started growing. This was just in front of our local grocery store. Next slide. And in like 2 or 3 days, we had over 2,300 people that signed up. They were against captive dolphins. Next slide, please. We then erected a big billboard that you saw in an earlier slide, and within 3 days, it was vandalized. I wonder who could have done that. I mean, it was terrible. You know, we spent $1,000 on that. And it was literally torn down. But you know, that was okay. Next slide. Because we got this, all this publicity. Our television filmed it, and it was in our newspapers. So it gave us a lot of press, and it, you know, wasn't a very nice thing to do. So, and next slide. And that's a close-up of it. It was a beautiful sign that we thought it was. Somebody obviously didn't. Next slide. And here's Rick and Helene before it was cut down, because it was put up for his arrival. Next slide, please. And then the press started growing, as I mentioned. We got the Miami Herald. Next slide. And then it started getting even bigger with the London Observer, the Reno Gazette, the New York Times, the Sun Sentinel. I mean, the reporters were just pouring in to find out what's going on your island with all this controversy. Next slide, please. And of course, we kept stressing the cruelty to the dolphins too. Next slide. And during that time, Gwen McKenna, the lady I mentioned earlier, was helping me mount an internet protest. And we ended up with 10 million people. Now, to be fair, some of those people, Dr. Rose at that time was with the Humane Society, and they have 7 million members, so she helped get them on board, and there were other organizations that were quite large. But we had also people like the James Bond, Pierce Bronson, the Free Willy producer, Richard Donner, Jane Goodall, Jean-Michel Cousteau. We have a lot of big names. And we presented all of this to our Prime Minister. And of course, all of this is very bad for a country like ours that depends on tourism. Next slide, please. And during that time, the Dolphin Project that you learned about from Lincoln a minute ago, they were documenting what was going on with dolphin fantasies, and which later became Dolphin Discovery, on them going through the Caribbean. Next slide. And this was the, next slide. Yeah, this was the original owner who opened up, first, next slide, first in Anguilla, and then came to Antigua, and tried to go into St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. And you'll learn why they didn't get into St. Lucia at the time. Next slide, please. And now these are the facilities that are active right now in the Caribbean. There are some that they're trying to open, Turks and Caicos and St. Lucia again, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Next slide. And meanwhile, the U.S. government was investigating the original owner. And next slide. And this was the first facility that had opened in Anguilla. And it was basically a concrete tank. Next slide, please. And that's the entrance to it there. And meanwhile, we were calling press conferences. Next slide, please. And we were trying to educate our public through our press on what was going on. We decided to take legal proceedings because we didn't want our dolphins caught around the waters of Antigua. And so we got funding, and we went to court. Next slide. And it was a pretty big deal. We still were under the original Prime Minister that I mentioned earlier. And for us, for a little environmental group to take the Prime Minister and all these other people to court was a pretty big deal. And because I've never been involved in anything like this, I've never even had a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. So to suddenly be involved in a big court case was like, oh my gosh. Next slide, please. And that was the original license that was given, saying that they could capture 12 wild dolphins annually. And of course we know that it's not going to be just 12 that are taken, because the capture is very brutal, the chase and the hunt and capturing them and all. So there would have been more than 12 dolphins removed from our waters. Next slides, please. And the legal work began. Our lead lawyer was our top environmental lawyer on the island, John Fuller, the older guy there. Next slide. And we just have a little clip of him talking about this. If you could play that, please. I'm here speaking with lawyer John Fuller, who was the lead lawyer when this whole saga went down with the dolphins, and he's just going to give us a little recap about it. Okay, thank you, John.
Well, we challenged particularly the capture of wild dolphins here. Permission before that was given to Dolphin Fantasy without any consultation, without any knowledge as to how it would affect the local population of dolphins, and we challenged that in court. And after taking the process nearly to its end, the government agreed to revoke the license given by them, which was illegal, of course, to capture any wild dolphins without the necessary requirements being done on the CITES. And so that came to an end, and hopefully it won't happen again, but we have to be on our guard all the time.
And so are you confident that had we not taken this action, they would have probably been capturing wild dolphins in our waters?
They would have tried. In fact, they went out to sea several times looking for dolphins. Luckily, they didn't find any, but they did try.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was certainly a big success, and we were happy that Abbott PC could take part in it. And thank you for your part in it, Lawyer Fuller. Slide, please. So this went on for about 3 years, all these legal things, because those of you who have been involved in legal things, next slide please, know that it's not a quick process, and it was just constant. I mean, as I say, it consumed our organization's life. Next slide please. And waiting for our day in court, and all the time, next slide, holding press conferences and trying to keep the public up to date on what was going on. Next slide. And this is, I don't have time, and you don't want me to read all this anyway, and I'm not going to, but the first thing we did was to file an injunction to stop wild captures, or potential wild captures. Next slide, please. And you can see here that we asked that they stop, that they don't even go out to try to capture, and they never did because we had this injunction, thank goodness. So, next slide. And of course, our lawyer used the CITES, which most of you probably know if you're in this room or animal-oriented, that what the CITES is. And again, I'm not a lawyer, and I won't go into trying to explain all of that, but just to point out that this was, a pretty big deal, the legal part. So, next slide. And I mean, constantly researching the conventions and things. And of course, this was not an inexpensive process, but we had wonderful support from international groups and things to make this happen. Next slide. And next slide, please. And there were very specific reasons that we opposed it. And again, I don't have time to go into all of this. Briefly, I'll just say, we knew that we had never had a population study around Antigua. And we didn't know if we had 10 dolphins or 500 dolphins. And we did this under expert guidance. We weren't just doing it, off the top of our head. Dr. Rose was very involved in it. She probably was so sick of getting emails and me contacting her about every question. And then Dr. Tony Foroff, who somebody mentioned earlier, she actually came to our island and helped do an assessment of the state of the dolphins. She wasn't allowed into the facility, unfortunately. The government invited her in, by the way. It wasn't even our group. Anyway, we kept going forward with trying to determine, what the impact was. And taking that number of wild dolphins could do a lot of damage, too, to the dolphin population. Next slide, please. And the captures, next slide, sorry. And the captures could be a serious threat to the dolphins that were left behind, because they suffer too when their families torn away from them. I mean, it would be like your brother or sister or mother being ripped away from you, or maybe father if you love your father. Next slide, please. Next slide. Antigua has a lot of really special things. We're a very eco-island. We have the rarest snake in the world. I know some of you may not like snakes, but it's literally the rarest snake in the world. We have the second largest frigate bird colony in the world behind Galapagos Island. We have endangered hawksbill turtles, the longest running study of hawksbill turtles in the world. We have amazing bird life. So for us to be doing something that was so unfriendly eco-wise, I mean, our tourists come here for these kind of things. They don't come to see dolphin prisons. And our tourism has not dropped because they're not there anymore, I can tell you. Next slide. We also invited Luis Ahoyas, who was the producer of The Cove, the movie I'm sure everybody in this room knows about. So he helped educate our public on what was going on there. Next slide, please. And you've already heard from Dr. Tom, who's with us today. Next slide, please. Here's Tom that you just heard speak. He explained to us what was happening with the algae on the reefs from the waste from the dolphin pen, and that it was going to kill our coral surrounding that area, which it did do damage to. Next slide. And we, as I already mentioned, Dr. Tony Frost came down and she did an official report for us and for the government. Next slide. And also Dr. Lopez, who at one time had been the chief veterinary officer at the aquarium in Cuba. He came also and he did a report. He was not allowed into the facility to inspect the dolphins, but he was able to observe them through the fence. And he made some recommendations. Next slide. And 4 years later, we won. The permission was revoked, and they couldn't capture our wild dolphins, thank goodness. Patience is a virtue. And next slide. Okay, yeah, that's the original and the revoked permit. Next slide, please. And then this is our victory, but we weren't going to stop there, because even though we won, next slide, we won the capture license, the show went on, and they were still in operation, and everything was still going on. Next slide. During all of this, there was a terrible incident on the island of St. Lucia. Jane Tipson was murdered. And I'm not saying who did it, so let me make that clear right now. I'm not calling any names. Her murder was never solved. But her environmental group was doing the exact same that ours was in protesting that there be no captive dolphins on her island of St. Lucia. Next slide. And it made the London Times that soon after it happened. As I say, it was never solved, but the week that she was murdered, this was going to the cabinet of St. Lucia, and obviously it was not approved. So, next slide. Then we started having some major environmental problems on our island, all as a direct result of the illegally blocked drain that had been blocked by dolphin discovery. And this is showing you, this stretch of beach and road led to hotels and restaurants, and there were villages all around. Local people couldn't get to their homes. We had mosquito outbreaks. Restaurants had to close down. You couldn't get to the hotels here because of this. And it gets worse. You'll see. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yep, you see flooding? That's my car right there. I couldn't even drive through that. So, next slide. And again, that's the block drain. And as this came over our radio and television, Antiguans went ballistic. Our people were very upset. Next slide. They had to call out police. Our defense force turned up. Next slide. The government sent backhoe to break open that. Now the dolphins were still in the pen there, and I was hoping they wouldn't open this because it would probably have killed the dolphins, or it certainly wouldn't be good for them for all this nasty water to go in there. And then we also had fish kill. Next slide. This was on the inside of the pond. All these fish started dying because the water was stagnant inside of there. And next slide. And it was nearly civil unrest. These were the Antiguans on one side. I was there. They were shaking the fence and yelling. And these were the dolphin discovery people on the other side. And then the Defense Force got involved in it, and the police, and it was not a pretty picture. Not a pretty picture at all. Next slide. This was December 2004, and during some of the unrest, you can see as the crowds gathered until the police came and ran everybody away because they were afraid there was going to be who knows what. Next slide. And of course there was huge outcries to close down because who can live with this? I mean, it was just it was a huge mess on our island environmentally. Next slide. And again, the press was picking up all of this because it was just such a nasty business, and this is not good press for an island that's tourist-oriented because tourists don't like this kind of thing. They come to our island for the beauty and the peace and the quiet and things, not for all this confusion. Next slide. So the government decided they were taking action, and our Attorney General actually called our group in. They called Abbott PC in and said, if they seize those 9 dolphins, would we take them? Now, I didn't have a clue what to do with 9 dolphins. Thank goodness it didn't happen, but it was a very upsetting time. Next slide. And Dolphin Discovery realized that this was a serious situation, so they started rounding up their dolphins, and I was called in the middle of the night that, next slide please, that we had 2 cargo planes on our runway there, and so I rushed in at daybreak to the airport. Next slide please. And there were all the dolphins lined up under these cargo planes to be loaded up. Next slide. And they were flown to Tortola, which is one of our near islands, where they had another facility, and I think 6 dolphins. I stand to be corrected, but they already had a group of dolphins there, and these dolphins were put in with those dolphins, which of course was an overcrowding situation. Next slide. And they did apply to return to Antigua in June, but our government obviously turned them down. Can you imagine that? I mean, so they said, no, you're not coming back here. So, next slide, please. When they left Antigua, they had borrowed from one of our local banks almost 500,000 EC dollars, which is our currency. And that money was never paid back. Also, when Dr. Lopez, who I mentioned earlier, the Cuban doctor, when he came to Antigua, he gave us this statement certifying that the purchase price when he worked in Cuba was between $20,000 and $60,000 US. I've heard higher values now, but that was what he told us at the time. Well, guess what? Next slide, please. Here it says on paperwork that these dolphins, when they came into our island and were declared to our Antigua customs, they were worth $3,000 each. That's not mere $20,000 or $60,000, is it? I mean, is that honest business to cheat our government of their revenue by under-declaring them? They're saying they're $3,000. I'll let you decide that for yourself. Next slide. Then Dr. Rose came to Antigua to help with, we also have a whaling issue, and she came, and she's with us. Next slide, please. As you all know, because we've heard her earlier. Next slide. And here she is in Antigua, giving us a lecture on whaling issues. And she actually helped, next slide please, helped in producing a documentary on whaling. Next slide please. And if you can just play this little clip for me.
Have been killed in the commercial whaling vessels, by the commercial whaling vessels. They are nowhere near their historic levels, and in fact several species were hunted to near extinction and some stocks were wiped out. So for anybody today to argue that there are too many whales out there or that there are a lot of whales out there don't understand what happened historically in the whaling industry. They don't understand how many whales were killed.
The government has prostituted itself for money. It has accepted Japanese money in exchange for voting the way the Japanese want them to vote. And the brothels are from here going south and from here going north. Nearly all of the Eastern Caribbean states have sold out to the Japanese, and there's no argument that it was done for anything other than money.
Right, and that's actually about whaling, a little off of dolphins, but that's another big passion of mine because I care about the whales too. Next slide, please. And more recently, in 2013, there was a public outcry because Dolphin Cove in Jamaica expressed an interest in coming to Antigua. Next slide. You can imagine our reaction. My quote was, when I was contacted by our press, "It's maddening, absolutely shocking, and disastrous." And I suggested the investor forget the idea, otherwise he would face countless petitions like the operators of Dolphin Fantasies did. They didn't come, thank goodness. Next slide. But now they're also looking at expanding to other islands, Turks and Caicos, I think we mentioned that earlier, and we've recently learned St. Lucia. And there are already St. Lucia friends that I'm involved in who are asking questions about what the negatives are and about they want to talk to Dr. Tom about the pollution and what happens with the algae overgrowing the reefs and things, because St. Lucia is a very big diving destination too, and they're also fairly eco-oriented, so we'll see how that plays out. Next slide, please. So we're not just happy with what we've done. We'd like to stop dolphin captivity in our island forever. We are lobbying our government to pass a law that there will never, ever, ever be marine captivity on Antigua or Barbuda again. And so far, next slide please, with the lobby, we started an online petition back in 2013. And next slide please. And the petition was presented to our then Prime Minister. And we started action. Next slide, please. Our Minister of Tourism was supporting this. If you can play that clip, please.
Good morning. I'm here with the Honorable Minister John McGinley, Minister of Civil Aviation and Tourism for Antigua and Barbuda. Sir, we're here to talk about the possibility of there being a law passed in Antigua that there will never be marine mammal captivity. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, certainly, and good morning, Martha.
Good morning.
We've reviewed this issue of marine mammals in captivity, and the Cabinet of Antigua had a lengthy discussion recently about it. And we have decided to move towards reviewing legislation or putting legislation in place to make it illegal to hold marine mammals in captivity. We're not there yet. We still have some work to do with your good assistance, Martha, and the rest of the teams that are involved. Certainly, but the Cabinet is of the view that this is something that we need to look at.
Next slide, please. Unfortunately, before the law could actually be passed, it was very close to being passed. We had general elections and a complete change of government in 2014. Our new Prime Minister is the youngest Prime Minister our country has ever had, but they're very receptive to the idea, but we haven't quite got them to go back because they obviously changed a lot of things the way that they were doing because they're a new government, but we're hopeful that we can get this law passed still. And we had a lot of support. Dr. Rose helped too, again, in raising funds because I had to hire lawyers to help with all of this. And we'll just have one more little clip on Lawyer Fuller. Next slide, please, of him talking about this because we're still going forward with this. If you could play that, please.
Okay, Lawyer Fuller, if you could just make a few comments on the potential law that we hope may be passed in Antigua on the fact that Antigua would have no marine captivity ever again, and where we are with that.
Well, laws are made to be broken, really, or to be repealed. So there can never be a law that says don't do this forever and ever and never, amen, because Parliament can always change it. But in fact, our cabinet in this country has on 3 occasions passed and put up a piece of legislation to prevent any marine captivity programs here for dolphins. It's been approved by Cabinet, but it has not yet reached the Legislative Assembly at all. But I think that if we were able to persuade the tourist sector that it is a good thing, a good marketing thing, that our arrivals will increase if we are able to say to the world, we will not have capture the programs for dolphins. We will support any activity to protect the environment. I believe that our tourism numbers will increase dramatically.
Wonderful. Well, I would love to see. I have a dream that we can accomplish this, and we were so close when the law was being discussed and debated previously under the former government. So I really hope that the new government, well, it's not so new now, but that we can get this kick-started again, and that maybe Antigua will join a handful of those astute nations that protect their marine mammals. So hopefully you're going to come on board with us on that, and hopefully we can get a law passed for it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Martha. Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Okay, and next slide, please. We're almost finished. So there is a hope that a law will be passed that Antigua will join that handful of countries that one of the questions earlier was what countries have a law against marine mammal captivity, that hopefully our country will be the first in the Eastern Caribbean, and we hope that we'll be an example for other countries, because I promised our government we will get such international press on Antigua being eco-friendly and taking a stand that other countries are going to say, wow, we should do that too. No more marine mammal captivity. Next slide, please. And that this is how they should live. And as the good book says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas. Next slide, please. And again, how they should live. And next slide. And in closing, I'll just quickly read, we need a newer and wiser and perhaps a more mystical sense of the animal. Remote from universal nature, man in civilization regards the animal through the glass of his knowledge, and sees thereby a feather greatly multiplied and the whole image in distortion. We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate in having been formed so far below ourselves, and thereby we err and greatly err. For the animal shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they live finished and complete, gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They're not brethren, they're not underlings, they're other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. Next slide. And in ending, I'll just say thank you for hearing my sad story. And even though we, my island of Antigua and Barbuda, had a happy ending because we got rid of a captive dolphin prison, the dolphins didn't have a happy ending because they went on to someplace else to be imprisoned. And they still remain imprisoned unless some have died. So the battle doesn't stop for those who are committed to this cause, which is why we're all here today. That perhaps we can make a difference for the sake of the dolphins. Thank you for hearing me.
Leave it there.